All right. Good morning, everybody. It's glad to see you. Glad you're here. Okay. We're still in ordinary time, and we have a lot of fun with this passage today because there's a part of this that you say it's going to be, you're going to go, yeah, this is pretty familiar, I think, for most people. It's in 3 of our Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, and synoptic is that Greek word which means alike. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's kind of a story that's somewhat related in John's Gospel, but it's not quite the same. But here we go. Everybody good? Hope everybody's doing okay. So here we are. Matthew. And think about this in terms of again, context about, I'm sure that that Ashley has already looked at the other options, and I'll look at them with you and just say, we'll read it and think about the part of this that's included in Matthew's gospel, but not part of the other 2. Okay? We'll get to it. This is the fun stuff, man. This is why you go to divinity school, you know? This is it right here. So, Matthew 16, verses 13 through 20. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do the people say the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but the Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." And then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Familiar?
Yes.
For the most part? Okay. Question, that's good. Go for it.
Where in the sequence of events this occur? How close is he going to Jerusalem?
He is on his way.
He is on his way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why is he telling them not to tell anybody that he's the Messiah?
Reverse psychology.
Yeah. Well, reverse psychology. Yeah. What would you think that would be the reason for that?
The reason I'm asking the question.
I know, that's right. Good.
I would think it's to help them be safe
Uh-huh.
during the process.
Maybe so.
Because otherwise they'd try to round
Yeah.
them up too.
Yeah. You know,
There's a timeline.
what? Huh?
There's a timeline.
There is a
It
timeline.
It can't happen
Yeah.
sooner than it needs to, and that's why he doesn't want them sharing it at this point.
Right. Well, let's think about a couple things. Number one, as we've talked about, you know, and this is Neil's premise, okay, or not Neil. It's really not Neil's, but this is the scholarship that I agree with, which is predominant.
That means it's yours.
Well, yeah, yeah, I really hold to this. That the first gospel written was Mark's, and Mark spends his whole thing about the messianic secret. The whole story is about don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody, don't say anything till it's the punchline. The punchline is the cross. The punchline is the cross. The Messiah, because the understanding of what Messiah meant, the Messiah was the anointed one, the one called out. And notice how he starts this whole story is, who did they say the Son of Man is? And that takes us back to Daniel's understanding of what the Son of Man was. Daniel's understanding of the Son of Man was that person or that entity that was coming to deliver Israel and set things back right. But notice too what he did, and he changes the discussion. He says, who do they say the Son of Man is? And they give their answers. And then he says, but who do you say I am? Woo! Oh, what did Jesus just do right there? He kind of flipped the script and said, he makes it this, hey, who does it say the Son of Man is? Well, da-da-da-da. And then suddenly, who does it say I am? So the inference here is
that the first time he identifies himself as the Son of Man? To the
oh,
disciples?
gosh. Jeez, I didn't anticipate that question. I should have, though. I think that, in this section, because we're almost at Transfiguration, and this is the 3 times he talks about the death of the Son of Man. So I'm going to say no, but I'm also going to say this is where it becomes much more connected there. So we have that part that he flips it to say, who do they say that I am? Or who do you say that I am?
Question I have is, and maybe just in the way it was written, but he says he is going to build his church upon Peter.
Well,
Well,
Is that the word?
is that the first time that he's used the word church? Why do you say
That's the word.
my synagogue?
yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Okay.
There's only 2 times the word church is used
Okay.
in this context. It's in Matthew 16 and Matthew 18, and it has something really kind of to do with something totally different than what we think. But can we hold on and we get back to this first part, the messianic secret part. Mark's gospel is totally built on him saying, "Don't ever tell, don't tell." Of course, all through Mark's gospel, the first thing everybody does is tell. Until they get to the time in Mark chapter 16 at the resurrection where the boy in white tells the women, go tell, and it says they leave in silence and fear. So the first time they said go tell, they don't tell. It is Mark's way. It is. I do think Mark, and this is why I like Mark so much. I think he's kind of sardonic. I think his language is really rough, and I think he makes a lot of fun underneath about the disciples. I think he really does kind of mock them, and I love that because the disciples are kind of goofy, but then again, I think I'm kind of goofy, and so I kind of feel
They're
like,
real people.
yeah, they're real, and I feel like if they have a shot, I got a shot too. So, and I think that was Mark's ultimate interest. And so Luke and Matthew also pick up on that sometimes. They use that in their gospel about don't tell just yet. Because the ultimate aspect of Messiah, and you see it a lot today too, in some of the Christian nationalism kind of things that come out, is that Jesus is this major warrior figure. And the one thing that Jesus never, ever, he always rejects is that the ultimate aspect, the pinnacle part of his messiahship is the cross. John, I'll be high and lifted up and draw all folks unto me when he's on the cross. And so the notion that they're trying to make him Messiah in a different sort of way than he is coming to be one. That is one reason he kind of rejects that. Does that make sense? Until we get to the pinnacle moment. Like Paul. Remember, you read Paul's writings, and Paul quotes Jesus in 1 Corinthians about communion, but he never quotes him. Now, there's a couple reasons for that. Paul's writings come out before the Gospels do. So either he doesn't have a lot of Jesus sayings, which is part of it, but the other part is Paul is not focused on what Jesus says. Paul is focused on what Jesus did. And his focus is always points us back to the cross. And the Messiahship is always about the cross. So, that, okay?
Why did Paul's writings come out before the Gospels?
I don't know. They just, I mean, maybe they were copyright. I really don't know. He got them out before the Gospels were out, though. Yeah. Yeah.
Caesarea Philippi. What exactly is this town he's going to? Is it a Jewish town per se, or is
No.
it
No, we're this is kind of still the Gentile area.
that's what I thought, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now we've got the Messiahship part kind of worked out. Let's go back to some of the other parts. This story. Were there any other questions too? Because the part that Matthew, and I got to keep up one time here, the part that Matthew includes that the other two leave out, this whole discussion with Peter about what that means. The other two, Jesus asked him, "Who do you say that I am?" They give the answers. John the Baptist and Elijah. They also leave out Jeremiah here, but again, Matthew's gospel written to Jews who are following Jesus. He's going to use more Jewish references than the other. Okay? John the Baptist too, a lot of them thought he was really something. They really were focused on him and his message. And then Elijah, who is, remember, when we're about to head to the Mount of Transfiguration. So this is kind of the context of where we are. And once he gets to Transfiguration, everything is focused on the cross. Go ahead.
I have a John the Baptist question.
Sure.
Why would they think he was John the Baptist? John the Baptist had just been beheaded by,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a contemporary, well, anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. That is interesting.
I mean, I would be, the Elijah and the references to the older prophets make sense.
Right.
But, it's like John got beheaded and here he is again.
Yeah. People have some weird notions,
Yeah.
But I do think it's a great pointing to who they think John the Baptist was and what he did. And then, of course, Elijah was the most important, in the Jewish tradition, Elijah is the most important prophet of all of them. They looked, Elijah's the guy. Now, why is it not Elisha? Because he asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit? I know not. But it's Elijah. And remember, on the Mount of Transfiguration, who were the two there? Moses, the lawgiver, the great lawgiver, and Elijah, the great prophet. So
in Matthew, he asks,
Yeah.
who do they say the Son of Man is? But
Yeah.
in Mark and Luke, he just says, who do they say I am?
right, which is, again, let's keep things in context and keep it. Who is the audience Matthew is talking to? And I know I talk about this stuff a lot, but I think that's what we have to keep in mind when we hear these things, that when people want to talk about discrepancies or differences in text, like, well, he said this here, he said this here. Why are those different? They're not harmonious. You can't reconcile those two things. Jesus either said Son of Man or he said I. One of the two. You can't be both. But so you either go, it's all wrong if there's a mistake, or, which I think that is just a silly response to what Scripture is. But the other one is that you have to keep in context. This writer, Matthew, if it was whoever Matthew was supposed to be, those are names that were put on later. But this congregation, who were probably, more than likely, Jewish folks who were following Jesus, that's a great ploy or a great writing technique to say it this way. because he's attaching Jesus to this Son of Man back, which is what that congregation would understand.
Most Gentiles wouldn't know anything about it.
If they did, man, yeah, it doesn't mean the same thing. So it is really, really important that we make that context. You know, it's kind of, you know, when we're, you know, when I preach here, I mean, I try to keep things local or talk about things, you know, that we can actually relate to. Hopefully I do. I mean, let's hope. And I don't talk about things that are local to, if I lived in Dearborn, Michigan, that's what I would talk about, but I don't. I live here. And that's, I mean, because you're trying to connect to the audience and connect this faith to be a real thing in their day. So the writer is making this really connect with who they are. Does that mean Jesus exactly said it this way or this way? No. But it does mean that it's connected to who they were at the time. And I think that's extremely important.
And he said something.
Yeah, that Jesus is, yeah, that yeah, we're in the ballpark here when you look at the three. And keep in context Matthew's gospel and that. And the people who are reading Matthew's gospel or listening to Matthew's gospel because they couldn't read anyway and somebody's reading it to them, that they didn't have Luke and Mark's gospel. They don't know that there's a Luke and Mark's gospel. They have no idea about any of that. But we do, so, I mean, that's the difference there. But so he includes, Matthew's gospel includes this larger conversation between Jesus and Simon Peter. You know, and this is a really important discussion. He goes, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah." Or if you're reading the King James Version, Simon Bar Jonah, because Bar is Hebrew for son. Okay, like bar mitzvah. Get it? Party for son. Okay, so flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So that tells us what? What does that tell us about this insight that Peter has?
That he didn't pick it up from the guy next door.
He did not learn it in divinity school.
No.
That is absolutely correct. That we don't get that this insight about who the Messiah is does not come because we're clever enough to figure it out.
Okay, is this the first time they've identified him as Messiah?
It is a now earlier. I mean, you in Mark's gospel you have the demons pointing it out
Yeah.
and him telling them to be quiet.
Andrew and them came to the lake.
Yeah,
said,
and they and John does earlier in John's gospel. John the Baptist does, but this is in a direct question, who do you say I am? This is kind of the pinnacle moment where Peter says, "You're the Messiah," which he gets that part right.
Yeah.
Now he's going to botch it in a little bit, but that's Peter. And guess what? That's all of us. Okay, which again is good news. Because if Peter can botch it and still become the Bishop of Rome, that's still pretty cool. You know? Because he messes up, but he's still, but it means that a couple of things. Number one, that the notion of the church is about the faith is what God gives to us. Not what we kind of cleverly figure out by sitting at home and reading the Bible late at night and, whoo, look what I just discovered. It's about what God gives to us. Now, I will build my church. Now, the church is, the word ecclesia is this notion for called out gathering. A called out gathering. It was used for other things, mainly political groups that were called out, set apart to make decisions and the like. And so the word church becomes later in as the first century moves along, as what they called that group of people who become what we are today. But it is an odd word for Jesus to use here because that isn't the word that Jesus would have used. But interestingly enough, he uses it here and Matthew 18 in connection to this, which is a strange little thing to us, but it wouldn't have been to the Jewish folks of his day. Down a little farther, he says, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And we read that and we go, what the heck does that mean? Well, and it's also the same wording he uses in Matthew 18 too, where you get over to Matthew 18 and it says, where 2 or 3 are gathered, I'm in their midst. Whatever's bound on earth is bound in heaven. Whatever's loosed on earth is loosed in heaven. That was rabbinical language that they used in that day to talk about what was decided and what wasn't, or what was decided basically in what was permitted and what wasn't permitted. So these are kind of the rules that they're deciding. I mean, and this is really long and convoluted, but he's saying, hey, what you folks work out as your understanding is what's bound on earth and heaven. Does that make sense?
Does that come up?
I'm looking at, oh, go ahead.
Does that come up to the Jewish tradition of, having the little box on the head and tying it around because they're
What?
carrying the...
Well, that's the Shema. That's Deuteronomy 6:4 about, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Write this and put it on your foreheads and on your, and they wore that scripture with them.
Unbinding that?
Well, it's binding and loosening is much more about decision making. And like when we get together, the general assemblies and all that, and we make our votes and we have our decisions about, these are the kind of things that we're going forward with in the faith. And that's the kind of the same thing they're talking about here.
It's a binding decision.
Yeah, they're making decisions about how we function. So it is really a lot more about polity and theology and how what they were going to decide and what they weren't going to decide, and how they function forward. So it does mean that how we make those decisions matter. And it's like when we're sitting in session, and I don't know if people think we sit around in there and flip coins or whatever. Those who sit on session or have sat on session know some people go, boy, why do they make that crazy decision? And if you sit in that meeting and understand, boy, we've really had to struggle over things. and they don't come, those decisions don't come easy. And sometimes we do get it wrong, if that's the way you say it, but for the most part, everybody is working extremely hard to make sure that we're being as faithful to Christ as we possibly can. And that's kind of what this language is here. Whatever the keys of the kingdom are for Peter, hey buddy, the decisions y'all are gonna make going forward are the ones that are bound and for here and heaven. And the Greek language here is much more serious than the English language. You kind of miss that, and I don't want to. Deb will tell me I've went way too much in the weeds if I start talking about that. So I'm not going to talk about that.
So far, it's very interesting.
Okay, and so here the word. And this is this big conversation where we and the Catholics might kind of love my brothers and sisters in the Catholic Church, so nobody get mad at me over this part. But this is probably where we kind of bump heads as a Reformed tradition, and then where they say, this says it's built on Peter as the rock, because Peter means rock, and Cephas, which he was also called, is the Hebrew word for rock. And here it says, upon this rock I will build a church. Well, the wording is Petros here, and so it gets kind of funny in the Greek. But I'm saying that much more, it's based on this statement that he's making much more than it is him himself. That what Jesus is building his church on is this statement that Jesus is the Messiah, much more than just on Peter himself. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
The bound on earth
Yeah.
is bound in heaven.
Right.
Doesn't that take God out of the whole picture?
No, actually, what it I can see where that's definitely what it does mean is that the decisions that we make as the church throughout the history and going forward means that we better be seriously focusing on what God is calling us to do and be about. Kind of like with Matthias. Remember when you get to the book of Acts, they pray, they make their decision, then they roll the dice, or and they go, oh, it's Matthias. He's the guy who replaces Judas. And you could say, well, boy, they sure left it up to something else beyond God, but they are really trusting that it's God who is leading in that decision. Does that make sense? No. Okay. No, I don't. I would never want to say that. Or I would. I really think that what's happening here and what's happening elsewhere too is that they're called seriously to the study of the text and study of history and the study of prayer or the faithfulness of prayer, that we just don't go around making crazy decisions about our faith. And I hope that I've never left God out of that in decisions what I say or do. Go ahead.
Maybe it's saying that it happened first in heaven, and
Yeah.
that's what made it happen.
Well, the understanding is that when we're making those statements, that what we're trusting that is totally where it comes. Yeah. It's kind of like, again, and I'm not Catholic. I've never been Catholic, so I don't want to say I answer for Catholics because my buddies might go, man, you're way off. You are way off. That's why I don't try to answer for my Jewish friends or my Muslim friends or my Latter-day Saint folks either, that it's hard to respond for other people's faith. But in here, that when the Pope hands down decrees, people go, they're supposed to take that really seriously. But they don't. They're taking it much more seriously, not because it's from the Pope, but it's from the person that they feel that the church has, and that God has anointed as the person.
But the whole problem with it is, if
Yeah.
we make the decision, it says it's made in heaven as well.
Yeah.
We're making decisions for heaven.
Well, again, it's saying that this is that it's much more in conjunction with what heaven has called us to do. Does that make sense?
It's like when you are faced with a decision, you
Yeah.
pray about it.
Right.
Then you're led
Yeah.
from heaven to
Right.
make a correct
Yeah.
decision.
We're not dictating for. I think we're dictating from. Does that make sense? It is not an easy. It's never easy. I hope that anybody who says, boy, I've made this decision from God, that, let's hope.
It'd be kind of like when you're on earth, you're supposed to be sharing, like spreading the seeds and
Yeah.
putting God's hands and feet. And then, like, if you're not, like, out spreading His word, then, like, people may miss out on that opportunity because you didn't, you know what I mean?
Right, it's definitely a call for that. Definitely a call for that throughout, but in both places, Matthew 16 and 18. I will say this though, when we get to Matthew 18, where we go, well, and I've done it too, which is, and I should know better, but sometimes I know better and still do stuff. I know better not to eat chocolate, but I do sometimes. That aside, we're not getting, but where two or three are gathered, the Lord's in our midst. And so when ministers look out and it's the 4th of July Sunday and everybody's on vacation, you go, wow, where two or three are gathered, the Lord's there. That is not what that passage is talking about. That passage is really talking about church discipline and about where those decisions are made. Christ is in their midst to help them make those decisions, where it's binding and loosening. That it's not something that we just do in and of ourselves. So this passage does two real things for us. It causes us, we're confronted with that question: who do you say that I am? And everything about our faith hinges on that question. Everything. Who do we say Jesus is? Because once we make that answer, that dictates how we live from there on. If we say he's a good guy who lived a really good life and he was cool, then you go live like that. But if we say he's the Messiah, the one who is the one who redeems Israel, he and all of God's people, and he is the one who redeems us as the church and who guides us to make those decisions in the church, and he is the one who is reconciling us all back to God, then our lives better answer that question in a very different way than what we would think. I mean, it means it's a very serious question that we have to answer, not with just words, but with our lives. And also, this passage also probably relieves us from a lot of stress in the church, because it's Christ who builds the church. It's not us. We think it's all based on, boy, if we work hard enough, we can make this thing work. And it's like, that's not what this is about. This is about Christ building the church. And those are two really, 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 really serious things for us to contemplate. Okay, let's pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for passages that really confront us with faith. Like, who are you in our lives? We can't just answer that with a simple, you're the Messiah, or you're not. We have to answer that with our lives every single day.